Welcome to this dotCMS website training for how to create a role for a person profile. Once you've logged into the dotCMS platform, you're going to select content and then search. And this is going to open up the content dashboard. Once you're on the content dashboard, you're going to look for the type dropdown and you're going to select for person. This is going to open up the listing of people, person profiles that you have access to. You're going to select the name of the profile that you want to add a role to. What this means is that you're going to need to already have a person profile created in the system. It might not be posted live yet, but it is something that you'll be able to have the required field saved so that the profile is available in the back end. Once you have the person profile open, you're going to scroll down until you get to the role field. And you can see the role section highlighted here. And we see that we don't have a role that has been created for this person profile, so that's what we need to do next. So we're going to click on this drop down button next to relate for roles, and we're going to select to relate new content. Now this is going to bring up a notification that's going to tell you that you will lose any unsaved changes you've made to this content if you continue. If you have made changes, please save content before continuing. Are you sure you want to continue? Basically, this means if you have any unsaved changes to the profile, you're going to want to save it first because this is going to take you to a different content type and you would lose any changes that you have not saved. So in that instance, if you needed to save your content, you would select cancel, and then you would move to lock to editing, and then you could select to save draft. And then you could come back here, select that relate dropdown, relate new content, and then you'd be okay to move forward. So we're going to assume that you have saved those changes. So we're going to click OK. And this is going to open up the new role for this particular person profile. So just like with any other content, there are required fields. The required fields show up as red, and the non-required or optional fields show up as gray. So right off the get-go, for the content tab, we have the host or folder, and that's a required field. So you need to select the drop-down, select the plus sign, and then choose which particular folder that you have access to that you're going to then save this role in. Now, if you have multiple folders that you have access to, you're going to want to save it in the same website folder as the profile has been saved in. So in this particular instance, I'm going to select for demo because that's where my person profile is saved. Next is the title field, and this is where you're going to type in the person's name. This is going to be the name of the role so that you'll be able to find it again in the back end of dotCMS. So for my purposes, this is going to be Jane User. Now, if you have a person that has multiple roles, or they wear different hats to where they might need to have more than one role, then your title for that particular role might need some more information, like the name of the unit that goes along with that. So if this was related to, let's say, packaging, and this was a role specific for Jane User for packaging, then you might type in _ packaging. And then that would then show a separate role for that, and then you would make additional roles for any person that might have additional titles with other units. Now in this particular instance, this is a standalone role, so I'm just going to leave that as the person's name. The URL title already pre-populates with that information, so there shouldn't be any information you need to change there. Now, job title is optional, but it is it is a field that is most commonly filled in. So you're going to want to put in the person's job title so that that can also get included. So I'm just going to type in dotCMS trainer, and that shows that information in the job title. Now, again, depending upon if the person has multiple roles, then this would be the job title that is affiliated with this particular role. You should not need to include multiple titles within a role, job title field. Next is primary role. And this is going to, again, be indicative of if the person has more than one role, that you would want to have a specific role designated as primary. So for example, if they work for maybe a department, but then they also work for the college, you would need to determine which one of those profiles might be considered a primary role. And then you would select that checkbox for that particular role. Now, there's also the option to hide a role from a person's profile. And there are times when maybe that might be a better thing to do. For whatever reason, maybe you need to get that person's profile to show up on a listing, but you don't necessarily want that role to show up on their profile per se. So in that particular instance, you would select hide role, and then that wouldn't show that particular role on their profile. Telephone number is also an optional field. This would be the person's office phone number. And if you're going to include that, you're going to type in the number in this type of format. For accessibility purposes, we need to make sure that it's denoted with the hyphens in between the numbers. And so that would be how you would fill that in. If there was an affiliated fax number for that particular role, then you would type it in that same format into the fax number field. Some people don't like to include a fax number, they don't have one, and so that's why it's also an optional field. The address fields, this is another important field when we're looking at dotCMS. We need to make sure that this is posted as 3 separate lines of text. The first line is going to be the building name or maybe the office location for that specific profile. Now, if you are an MSU Extension employee, most often you're not going to fill in this address field. You're actually going to make a relationship to your work location in the relationships tab, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's say you do have a regular office address that you want to include in here. So what you might do here is type in the name of the building, and then you would hit the enter key and then type in the street address. And then you would input whatever room number it's affiliated with where the person's office is. And then you're going to type in the city, state, and zip. And you need it to be in this format with this street address and the city, state, zip, because once that profile goes live, that address location is going to be clickable to open up in Google Maps. So it's going to try and provide GPS so that you can navigate to that person's office. So it's very important that you don't just put a building name and then your room number. You need to actually put in the street address and the city, state, zip. So that's why we've asked for the 3-line format for that. Next is the summary or area of expertise field. Now, this is something where you can type in sentence of information or sentences. It's a short field, but you can type in some information. An example might be if someone is an expert in climate change, then you could type in climate change in here, or you could input what type of climate change expertise they might have. Maybe it's in disaster recovery, that kind of thing. So maybe you might want to get specific as to that type of information, but whatever you choose to put into this field, you can hand type it in there. It is not a required field, but it's a nice enhancement to a profile, and it shows up as a separate heading on the profile. Next is the organization field. Now, this is also optional, and how this field is used is if the person that the profile's been created for, if they're not someone that is within the college, or maybe maybe they're with the College of Human Medicine, but it's a profile that you want to have on your website. So we're not going to necessarily automatically have a profile for them. Then that's where you might want to put in their organization name into that field. And again, that's optional. This is not a field that's often filled in. It's typically for folks that are from another college at MSU, or even people that are outside of MSU altogether. And a lot of times this is because they're an expert in some specific area and it's related to X program. And so you want that person's profile to show up in a listing of experts. And that takes us through the content tab. Next is the map tab. Now this tab is specific for extension. So if you are not an extension employee, then you can skip this field. However, if you are an extension employee, then this allows you the ability to be able to select for your coverage area. You can select Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula, you can select the whole state, you can select different districts, and then you can also even come in here and select specific counties if you want to, so that will be able to give you the coverage showing on your profile in that kind of a way. Now, if you need to adjust this, if you are adding in those map entries, you can either deselect a county by clicking on the name of it, or there's also this option here to clear the map. As you see, that county I had highlighted is now gone. So that's how the map function works. Next is the relationships tab. And this is going to be a place where you're going to need to make at least one relationship, if not two or more, depending on the person's profile and what information you need to share. First of all, if you're the website that this profile is going to appear within is an organization website, often this is a department website or even the main college website, then you would select for that organization role. It can also be different programs or initiatives. Then we have the data set role. This is another type of website. These are usually subsets of organization websites. So for example, if we're talking about MSU Extension is considered the overarching organization site, where the data set role would be those county websites. It would also be any topic sites or academic programs for different departments. There would be considered data sets. So you would need to determine if your person's profile is going to have an organization role or a data set role, and then you would select to make that kind of a relationship. Now for my particular example, Jane User, that's going to be an organization role. So I'm going to select the relate button, and this is going to bring up the list of matching results. And I can select the most appropriate match by clicking on the checkbox here and select relate. And now you can see here is the organization role showing in this particular field. Now work location is specific for extension employees. This is going to be also some ag bio research centers have specific work locations. So if you're not one of those, you're going to skip this field. But if you are extension or ag bio research, then you're going to need to select the relate button for work location. And it's important to note that you can only have one work location for each role, so that if you have different work locations, those would constitute a separate role. And then you would be able to select for your specific county, and then that would prompt that relationship field to fill in here. Series role, this is not as common of a relationship to make. Typically this is related to committee listings. So if you need to make a series relationship, you're going to select the relate button for that field, and then you would be able to select the specific series page that it would be related to. And then you would be able to make that selection. So I will just do demo series page and relate. And the final field in relationships is persons. And this is another field that you're going to need to fill in, because we need to be able to relate this new role back to our Jane User person profile. So to do that, we're going to select the relate button, and then this should bring up a list of matching results. And here's my Jane User profile here. So I can make that relationship and select the relate button. All right, so that's all the fields for relationships. Next is the tags tab. And there's a couple of different fields here that you might need to fill in. The first is called person type. And the only times when you're going to need to utilize this field is for a category type. So I'm going to select the link for category type here so you can see what those are. So you can see here, it might be things like alumni, adjunct faculty, emeritus faculty, faculty, graduate students, specialists, staff, that kind of thing. So typically what happens with these kinds of categories is they're used on sites that have more than one person listing. A lot of sites just have the one listing. And so if they do, then you don't need to include a category. But if you have a site like a department site, you might have a faculty listing and a staff listing and an emeritus faculty listing and a graduate students listing, to where you might need to select for that particular person's role which listing type they might need to go on. But again, this is not something that's across the board. So you're going to need to check your specific website listing widget to see if this is a required field or not. If it is, then you would select the name of the category. You can see here alumni, and then you're going to select the X box to close this particular window. And then you should see that alumni category type is now showing under category type. The final field in here is called person tags. And this is really important. You need to have at least one tag filled in for this field for every person that has a role that's created. And that tag should be indicative of what the name of the unit is, or the name of the program, initiative, department, that kind of thing, so that we can have that show up in the tags for searchability. So for my purposes, this is going to be demo, because this is my demo website. If it's for a department, say that School of Packaging, then you would type in School of Packaging. And you can see here, these are pre-populated tags. I'm typing that information, starting to type it in, and there is a tag in the system for that. You're going to be able to select from that, from the pre-selected tags that show up. Now, the other types of tags that you can put in person tags is related to a person's area of expertise. Now, if this person, like I mentioned before, has that expertise in climate change, then there happens to be some tags related to climate change, and you can select some of those if you're interested in that. So again, I started to type that in, and we can see what those pre-populated tags might be. So I can select climate change. Now, there might not be a tag in the system for the type of area of expertise that the person might have. And so you might need to create a new tag for them. I'm just going to type in, bulldozer. There's no tag for this in the system. So this will be something easy to see how a tag can get created. You're going to type in the name of the tag as you want it to appear, and then you're going to click on the Enter key on your keyboard. And you can see here, there is now a box showing around the word bulldozer that will now become a new tag once this role has been saved or published. And I'm going to remove that tag at the moment because I don't want to create that new tag when I actually save this role. But that's how you go about doing it. You type in the name of that tag as you want it to appear. You click the Enter key on your keyboard, and then you'll be able to have that available after you save, draft, or publish this particular role. And that takes us through the required tabs at the top that you would need to fill in when creating a new role. So next you need to take a publishing action, and you can select to save draft, or you can select to publish. So in this particular instance, I'm going to select to publish, and I'm going to have my content saved. And then the second action I need to take is to return to Jane User, which is the profile I was just working on. And this will then confirm for us that the role has been applied to this particular profile. And we can see here when we scroll down to roles that it does indeed show that new role in that field. And then you can select lock for editing for your profile and select publish. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to confirm that that new role has been filtered onto that profile in its live format. And that's the process for creating a new role in dotCMS.